Hello, my name is Max and I'm presenting Here Comes No Boom, the lack of sound feedback effects on performance and user experience in a gamified image classification task, which is work I did together with Vladislav Hnatovskiy, Katja, Pascal, Lessel and Lennart, Nacke. I guess most players agree that game sound is an integral factor for the success of video games. It's considered a core pillar of game atmosphere, can lead to positive effects on factors such as flow and immersion, and can affect the player's emotional state. This in turn can support the narrative and the perceived realism of game experiences. In fact, sound effects are not just an integral part of games, but also considered a gamification element in gamified systems, which are characterized as systems using elements known from games in a non-game context. Similar to games, gamification typically complements the visual presentation of such elements through sound. For example, when unlocking a badge, when supporting the gain and loss of points, or when congratulating users upon reaching a certain level or goal. Yet, despite their widespread usage in the domain of gamification, the effect of different sound effects on performance and user experience when supplementing gamification elements has not been studied systematically as far as we know. To contribute to this, we created 18 different sound effects supplementing the gamification element points in an image classification task, which you can see on the right. In this task, pictures were shown and users were asked to identify certain objects in the picture, similar to well-known capture tasks. When correctly identifying objects, users received 10 points, and depending on the study condition, a sound was played. To guide the design process of sound effects, we orientated on the circumplex model of effect by Lessel. It's a model for classifying emotional states along two spectra, valence and arousal. We created at least 3 sound effects for each quadrant of the circumplex model and were interested in understanding how sound effects, differing in their valence and arousal, affect the performance, effective experience and motivation of users within gamified systems when supplementing the gamification element points. We used these sound effects in a pre-study and checked whether the created sound effects actually lead to the intended emotional responses. This pre-study will be omitted, however, due to time constraints. Based on this pre-study, we were able to identify 4 sound effects, one for each quadrant of the circumplex model. The first one is for the high arousal, high valence condition. This is called a maze drum. Then we had whirly for the low arousal, high valence condition. Creaking noise for the low valence, low arousal condition, and aggressive pitch for the low valence, high arousal condition. In the main study, we wanted to investigate the following hypotheses. So first of all, we expected that the type of sound effect has an effect on task performance. We also expected that this should affect user enjoyment, immersion, as well as effective experience. To investigate these hypotheses, we had 5 conditions. The low valence and high arousal condition, the high valence and high arousal condition, the low valence and low arousal condition, as well as the high valence and low arousal condition. In these conditions, the respective sound effect was played when receiving points. In addition, we had one control condition where no sound effect was played when receiving points. We conducted an online study with a between subjects design. After calibrating the volume and assessing demographics, participants were randomly assigned 1 out of 5 conditions, as explained before. After completing the image classification tasks, they were then asked to fill out the intrinsic motivation inventory, parts of the player experience inventory, as well as the self-assessment mannequin. We conducted a power analysis to inform the number of participants, which revealed a minimum of 305, assuming a medium effect size of 0.25 and 95% power, such that the probability of not detecting a medium effect when there was a true medium effect to be found was as low as 5%. Overall, we had 317 participants, 58% self-identified as female, 40% as male, and 1% as other. Coming to the results, regarding task performance, we could not find any significant effects regarding the time users took per task, nor the points users received per task. So H1 can clearly not be supported. There was also no effect on the enjoyment and competence factors of the intrinsic motivation inventory, nor on the choice factor. However, there was a significant effect regarding perceived pressure. In the high valence low arousal condition, this was the whirly sound effect representing emotions such as being calm and content, participants perceived less pressure than in the low valence high arousal condition, which was aggressive pitch representing emotions such as being afraid or angry. and also perceived less pressure than in the low valence, low arousal condition, where we used creaking noise representing being sad or bored. So we could conclude that low valence sounds can detrimentally affect the user experience of the gamified task. On the PXI factors, competence and immersion, we could again find no effects. So we found an effect on the pressure factor of the intrinsic motivation inventory, but it seemed like this difference did not really translate into any differences regarding other measures of enjoyment. Therefore, this effect is quite weak evidence for H2, which is why H2 is not or only partially supported. We could also not find evidence for H3. Lastly, regarding affective experience, there was no effect regarding the valence nor the arousal factors of the self-assessment mannequin, which is why also H4 is not supported. So, although our study was pretty well powered, we could not really find many effects, and most of our hypotheses could not be supported. Simply put, there was no boom. However, what's the interpretation of this? Well, maybe sound effects are not as important as one might think in gamified settings. This could be explainable by publication bias, making significant results more likely to be accepted for publication. There is a meta-analysis by Berkey et al. On the effect of sound effects on user performance, which found an overall positive effect. However, they did not conduct a funnel plot analysis, which could have shed light on potential evidence for publication bias. Another explanation for the missing effects in the main study could be related to the visual dominance of the task and its greater semantic relevance to the user. Therefore, the relationship between sound effects, visual feedback, and the context of a gamified system should be investigated in future work. Related to this, maybe the effect of sound effects is smaller than we thought, which means that more participants would have been needed to find these smaller effects. Lastly, limiting factors such as the fact that sound effects are rather short, that the task was quite specific, and that participants might have become used to the sound effects, leading to a reduced external validity, should be considered. And yeah, you can find more discussion about that in the paper. And yeah, with this, I'd like to conclude and thank you for your attention. And yeah, I would now be very happy to take questions. Thanks.